Welcome back, everybody. For this video, I'm going to talk about the poem It's Nation Time by Amiri Baraka, and I also want to talk about some of the videos that I posted. So, I guess I'll give you some instructions first. What I would do, if you haven't done this already, what I would do is watch first the video for We Shall Overcome that I posted. This is all posted on Moodle. First, the video for We Shall Overcome, and then the video for It's Nation Time. So watch both of those. And then I would post in the discussion thread, the one that says discussion videos, I would post in that thread, and then I would come back and watch this video. So if you haven't done those things yet, I would go and do that now, especially watching the videos, because I'm going to talk about kind of comparing these videos, and it's normally something I would just do in class and we would all do together, but since we can't do that, I think the way that we can do it is, watch both the videos, post in that discussion thread, and then you can come back here and get my thoughts on the matter. Okay, so now that you've done that, and now that you've posted in that discussion, let's talk about these two videos. So, I think these make for a good comparison. The first one, We Shall Overcome. So this is a song, I don't know if we know for sure like when this song was written or whatever, but it's kind of a song that's always been associated with protest movements, and then during the Civil Rights Movement, it really became like a central song that people would sing as they were doing marches or sit-ins or whatever. I think Martin Luther King refers to it as the anthem of the Civil Rights Movement. As you could see from the video that we watched, where it's like a choir or whatever. Oh, I should also say, the first like minute of that video is just like silence, or they're just like humming or whatever, so you can skip like the first minute. You don't necessarily need to watch like the entire thing. I think we get the point. But yeah, so it's performed by a choir, and it was definitely picked up really more so on the side, on the more like Martin Luther King kind of church aligned strain of the American Civil Rights Movement. I think actually in the speech that we're going to read from Malcolm X that I gave you for homework for this week, Malcolm X actually kind of mocks the song. I think he says that in a real protest or in a real revolution, there is no singing, there is no We Shall Overcome. So in both the readings that we're looking at from MLK and from Malcolm X, they both look at like identify this song with something with a particular part of the civil rights movement, and it's definitely this more church aligned kind of side. It was kind of more the protest side where people were doing their peaceful protests, and they would get beaten or whatever, and they would like not fight back and stuff, right? The more like non-violent turn the other cheek kind of thing. So I think we can maybe see why that's kind of the connotation that the song takes on, based on some things about both the way that it's performed in the video that we watched, and if we looked at the actual lyrics and kind of analyze it as a piece of poetry and just based on the words. So first of all, the way that it's sung, like we said, it's a choir, so it has the kind of a church feel. It's a bunch of people doing a harmony of it. There's no instruments, I don't think, right? I think it's just the choir being a cappella. It's definitely a slower song, right? Like I said, it takes like a minute to even get started, and then all the words are held for a long time, so it takes them a long time to do it. So it's a very kind of slow song, I would say. It kind of sounds like a hymn. If you have ever had to sing any of these like church songs, I think they all are kind of this like slow plodding. They have these like old timey sort of melodies and stuff. So I think just from looking at the form of it, which when we're talking about analyzing poetry, we always want to be thinking of both the message that we get from the words that are used and also the form that it takes and the structure of what we're looking at. So yeah, I think we can say that this is more slow, kind of sounds like church music, all that stuff. When we look at the lyrics, I think the one that sticks out to me the most is someday. We shall overcome someday. We will walk hand in hand someday. I think for the last chorus they might change it to today, like we will overcome today. They make it at the end of it, but mostly it's someday, and I think that that is kind of a telling thing about this. I mean, most of the lyrics are not, particularly, are not like super interesting, or I don't think I have that much to say about them. But just this repetition of, we'll do this someday. It's There's kind of two things with this. Number one, it's hopeful, right? It is. It does seem that they're all committed to like the inevitability, right? That things will continue to get better, that justice will be achieved. When? Someday. So I think that we would have to say, even if it changed it to today in the last chorus, it's definitely less urgent than, It's Nation Time, which we'll start talking about in a minute if we're comparing it to that song and even just to the words of that poem. It doesn't have the same sense of urgency, I would say. We shall overcome someday. It's hopeful because, they're like, we will have success, but it's also kind of gradual. It's also more incremental. It's also like, we'll get there. Just keep on fighting the fight, and we'll get there someday. Yeah, again, it just lacks the immediacy and the urgency of It's Nation Time. And I guess it's kind of all I have to say about that song. So maybe we should move to It's Nation Time. So just starting off with the title number one, It's Nation Time. It is Nation Time. When? Now. It's Nation Time someday? No, it is currently Nation Time. So right from the bat, I think we can see again the sense of urgency that this one has compared to We Shall Overcome. The other word here, nation, is going to be important. I'm not going to say too much because I'm going to do another video for you on this idea of black nationalism, which was another kind of ideology that was very important to the civil rights movement. So I think it deserves its own video. So I'm not going to say too much about it, but you can see nation relating to black nationalism, right? And then I guess we can talk about the form of this one. So if the other one sounds like a choir and more like a hymn or something, this is much more fast-paced. The instruments, we have saxophone, bass, drums. I think those are the main ones I noticed. Possibly guitar, but saxophone, bass, and drums mainly. Which, if we can compare that to the a cappella of a choir, so we have different instruments, less traditional instruments, right? And I think saxophone, especially in the 50s and 60s, is related a lot to like rock and roll music, and like jazz music before that. So we have that kind of stuff. It's obviously a much faster song, just in the beats, much more energetic in the way that I think it's Amiri Baraka, the poet. I think he's also singing. The way he sings it is very energetic. He's screaming and yelling at certain times. So yeah, we can just see how kind of the pace of the song, I think, kind of connects to the urgency that It's Nation Time sees in connection to the civil rights movement and what it thinks people need to do to start gaining equality and stuff. They have no time for someday. Amiri Baraka has no time for that. It's right now. So yeah, you have this kind of non-traditional form that I think fits with a kind of non-traditional message, or maybe to say another way, kind of a revolutionary form that fits with a revolutionary message. So it's right, still talking about form. Even if you look at this poem on the page, right, it doesn't look like a sonnet or something like that. There's some lines that are all indented. Sometimes it's indented like four spaces in or something. On the very last page, they're all kind of on a slant like this. So just the form of it on the page as well is, I would say, non-traditional or non-conventional or maybe revolutionary, right? Not wanting to fit in with old forms. And I think we can see how the kind of political message kind of goes along with that. Okay, so let's get into some of the actual words in the poem. So there's a lot of repetition here, right? And just starting out, time to get together, time to become, time to get up, become, all this stuff. So again, time. What time? Now, right? Not in the future, not tomorrow, not later. It is now time to do these things. So I can't emphasize enough just the difference in the kind of gradual, slow kind of plodding move towards justice that We Shall Overcome is thinking about versus the urgency that we see with It's Nation Time. Some other things that I want to notice here. I think a big theme that we see coming up in this is unity. And I think that's another one that we'll see in the video I'm going to do on Black nationalism is this idea of like racial solidarity, of coming together, of like all Black people coming together and realizing their common interests and having each other's back and working together and that kind of stuff. So when he says things like unite, unify for nation time. I see him kind of talking about that. Come together in unity, unify for nation time. So yeah, we have that the kind of message of unity and solidarity that I see throughout this. Some other things that I think we can look at here. If you look at his like the specific things that he's calling for people to do, right? So he's telling people, come on, get out here, get out on the streets, help people come together, nation time, all this stuff. Some of the other like specific things that I see him calling for. This is on the second page. In the middle of the page, kind of, he says, strike, close forward, close prudential, burn the policies, tear glasses off dead statue puppets, even those they imitate life. So strike, close, Ford, close, Prudential. Ford and Prudential are big companies, right? Ford, the car company, Prudential, what are they, insurance or something like that? So he's saying strike, close these corporations. I think there's another mention of striking as well, like when people are striking, come out and help. Uh, so yeah, in terms of like specific things that he wants to see happen, people going on strike, kind of shutting things down, burn the policies. That's another really interesting one, especially when we're thinking of where a poem like this fits into the political ideas of the time period, which is something we should all be thinking about, right? As I've kind of suggested on the poetry essay assignment sheet for our suggested topic. So burn the policies. I think, so when we look at Letter from Birmingham Jail, or when we talk about Martin Luther King, he was always talking about negotiating and trying to get power to make concessions and, talking to local governments and stuff like that. And, it's not that the only stuff King wanted was laws to be changed. He definitely wanted other stuff. He supported strikes himself, like we've talked about. He also had, you know, well-developed views on what he thought needed to happen economically and stuff like that, even though people don't talk about that stuff. But he thought that he was more interested, I guess we can say, in legal fixes to these problems than more radical figures were. Right? King still thought it was worth compromising with the local governments. He did view the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act as important pieces of legislation. When the more radicals, I don't think they cared as much about what laws the American government was passing. Didn't think the American government would ever be on their side, so they weren't really interested in the laws they were passing. But I think King, kind of was. So like when Baraka writes "burn the policies," I think he's very much taking a position on that issue, right? Of like, I don't care what your policies are. I don't care what laws you're going to put out there. It's never going to be good enough because ultimately, the whole system is rotten. And something else I'm going to talk about in the other video I'm going to do is this idea of like structural racism or institutional racism. And from that position, people like Baraka looked at the United States and said that this is not an institution that's capable of equality, because of how it was founded, because of the way that it's set up, the rules inherent within it, the power that it gives to southern states, whatever. Because of all these reasons, they viewed it as not really even capable of ever addressing this stuff in a meaningful way. They thought they had to do it themselves, right? So much of it was about seizing power for yourself rather than asking for a compromise with the people in power. So when Baraka says burn the policies, I just don't think he's interested in compromising with the government. It's more we need to set everything on fire and do it ourselves, right? Similarly, also at the bottom of the second page, he says, "Help us stop the devil. Help us build a new world." So help us stop the devil. I don't know if he's doing the thing that you see sometimes from certain writers within the civil rights movement, and this was kind of connected with like the Nation of Islam kind of stuff, where they talked about like white people being devils and that kind of thing. I don't know if that's exactly what he's doing, or if he's being more metaphorical and just saying that his enemies are the devil because they're like that bad. So I think that's another thing of viewing their enemies that they had to overcome as the devil. That's not something that MLK would have done, right? He was saying love your enemy and turn the other cheek and those sorts of things, and that our enemies are just ignorant, kind of, and they need to see, have a like conscious, have their conscience tell them what's right, and kind of realize the mistakes that they've made. Whereas he says, help us stop the devil, help us build a new world. So not only stopping the devil, but also building a new world. And King was in like his "I Have a Dream" speech or something. You can say that that's him looking towards a new world. But I think what Baraka means by new world is very different here. I think he's talking about a complete teardown of the system and rebuilding something new, a new world, right? So I think what I'm trying to get at here is just how radical I think the political opinions that Baraka comes through with in this poem are, right? Another point that I wanted to look at. Oh, okay. So with this idea of building a new world, I think another thing we can say about that is that it's more than integration. When we look at MLK, a lot of his goals were around integrating society, right? Getting rid of the old code of segregation, having black people and white people, live together, live in the same communities, go to the same schools, all these things. And I think part of it was that he thought not only this, but I think he thought that would, help to reduce racism. That like if we just got to know each other, people would be less racist or something like that. And that might be true, but I just think the more radical thinkers, like Baraka here, weren't interested in integration in the same way. They wanted power for themselves. I think a useful way of thinking about it is you might have heard the phrase self determination. That usually gets used in terms of countries and like countries being able to decide, not being colonized, right? Like I've talked about this before, but in like the 50s and 60s, you see a lot of former colonies gain their independence, and there was a big deal, a big idea of self-determination that the people who live here should be able to decide how they're governed and what the rules are and stuff like that. So you see some of this with black people in America kind of taking up the same ideas of self-determination, like we should be able to govern ourselves, right? But it's weird because they're not living in a colony per se because they're still living in America. So it showed a little bit different, but I think it's still this idea of wanting direct control, not like wanting power, the people in power to listen to you or negotiate you, but wanting to take power for yourself. Another thing in here that I'm not like totally sure what to do with is this part where he mentions like a bunch of religious figures and just like is saying that they were black. Like Christ was black, Krishna was black, Shango was black, Black Jesus, stuff like that. And obviously, if you look into the history of these religious figures, it is weird that a lot of them have been, depicted as just like white with blue eyes and blonde hair, because if you were born in Jerusalem at the time, that's probably not what you would look like, right? We know this kind of stuff. But when he's saying like Jesus was black or stuff like that, obviously it's again this thing about religion within the civil rights movement that we've talked about with King, obviously, being a reverend, that we talked about with Mississippi Goddamn when she's saying, I've even stopped believing in prayer. And then we see it showing up here, but in a slightly different way. I think maybe what he's trying to do is develop like a more, I guess we can say, an Afrocentric viewpoint, and kind of what this means is like looking for like a uniquely black perspective on things, like um, like the fact that Jesus gets depicted as white, as having blue eyes and stuff. I think we can view that as kind of Eurocentric thing, right? Because usually for so long, people's views of the world and the way we understood history and culture and stuff was kind of biased towards Europe. So I think there was an effort to try to think about like what like a uniquely black point of view would be. So I don't know. Maybe I'm going in a weird direction with that, but I think there's something going on there of trying to develop like a uniquely black look at these things, like having religious figures who are black, and stuff like that. But yeah, we see religion again coming up as kind of an issue of where that fits in with the civil rights movement. All right, I don't think I have too much else to say here, but I would just want to emphasize again the connection between the kind of radical form that this poem has and the radical message that it then sends. And I think that's something to think about when it comes to writing style when we look at MLK or Malcolm X or anybody else, and for all these poems. So I think the big takeaway here is that these kinds of themes of unity and racial solidarity, just like the radicalness of it, the urgency of it, and his view of a new world and these kind of aggressive or sometimes violent means of getting there, going on strike. He talks about taking over the schools at one point. I'm not totally sure what that means, but yeah, it just seems all very aggressive and like taking what's yours, not asking for negotiations and stuff like that. So yes, radical kind of message here that I think we would have to see. Like if we look at it compared to Letter from Birmingham Jail or something, I think we can see the kind of differences within the politics of the civil rights movement here. All right, I think that's all for now. See you soon.